They believe that there is no God. They believe that nothing caused everything for no
That's
reason.
not true.
They believe there's no ultimate purpose
That's not true.
for anything. They believe there's
That's
no
not
afterlife.
true.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today we've got a clash between Matt, who's coming at this purely from reason and evidence, and Michael, who's convinced that morality only makes sense if it was handed down by God. What starts as a calm conversation about right and wrong turns into Michael trying to tell Matt that he isn't even a real atheist. And trust me, that goes exactly as well as you'd think. This one is a slow burn that builds into one of the cleanest takedowns I've reacted to in a while. So stick around to the very end because the final line genuinely had me grinning. Before we get into it, drop a comment and let me know where in the world you're tuning in from. I love seeing how far this channel reaches. All right, let's get into it.
That is not evidence that God wrote a moral code on your heart. I'm sorry, but if you're going to hang on. Yeah. If you're going to construct a logical argument for something, the conclusion should be entailed in the premises. And your conclusion that God wrote something, a moral code on your heart, is not in any of the premises that you just offered, not one.
Okay. So if I sacrifice my life to save someone else, I jump in front of somebody to take a bullet for them, okay, because I want to protect that person. And I think that's the morally right thing to do. I can't think of a more obvious example of living your life and giving your life in service to an objective moral code that does you no good. There is no personal benefit to countless moral acts that people do, but they do it because they think it's right, because it's written on their heart. We all have that feeling, Matt.
So, no, we don't necessarily all have that feeling. I will point out that you just engaged in an argument from personal incredulity fallacy the second you said, I can't think of any other reason to do this. And I can demonstrate that there are justifications for perceived altruism that, as I mentioned during my opening statement, that altruism is something that we can demonstrate. And you're making an appeal to altruism now, but we can also demonstrate fake altruism. That as long as I live in a society that provides benefits to people who willingly put their lives at risk and sacrifice them, then there is a benefit to me to put my life at risk and to potentially sacrifice it. Whether it is a sensation in my head that I will be lauded and applauded by people all around the world, you can take an altruistic action through pure selfishness of, I want to be celebrated. I would like a statue of me that exists long after I'm gone,
so
and therefore I will take. No, wow.
I'm not. Some people do that, of course.
Yes, and so the fact that some people do this means that there is and you just acknowledged it and agreed to it, means that you were wrong when you said you can't think of a reason to do this other than a God giving you this sense of morality. There are other reasons to do it. Now you have to show for any given situation that you view as altruistic, which one is it? Is it real altruism or fake altruism? And how can you tell?
I mean, I think that some of it is real. I mean, if you're saying that, sorry?
I do too.
Yeah. So why do people do it? If it's being real.
So the only thing that's required for someone to take an altruistic step is for them to be convinced that it's the right thing to do. And you can be convinced that something's the right thing to do, irrespective of whether it is or whether it's objectively true. You can get somebody to commit atrocities once you can get them to believe absurdities. And as long as the only thing that's required for someone to act in a way that is consistent with a particular religious doctrine is for them to be convinced that the doctrine is real. It does not require that the doctrine is in fact real. And so you have to you have to come up with a way to show the difference between someone who's acting in accordance with a doctrine they believe to be real versus someone who's acting in accordance with a doctrine that is real. I don't know how to do that.
Right. But you've agreed with me that there are people who act out of respect for an objective moral law.
No, I've agreed with you that there are people who
that's not in personal interest.
I agree with you. There are people who act that way because of their belief, and whether or not it's whether they believe it's objective or not is irrelevant.
Right.
They can believe it's subjective and still do it.
This is the moment the whole God wrote it on your heart argument collapses, and Matt doesn't even raise his voice to do it. You have to understand what's happening here. Michael wants to claim that morality proves God, and Matt points out something so basic it should end the conversation on the spot. Matt says the conclusion has to be entailed in the premises, and that the idea God wrote a moral code on your heart isn't in any of the premises Michael offered, not one. That is not a clever dodge, that is just how logic works. You can't smuggle your conclusion in at the end and pretend it was there the whole time. And here's the part that blows my mind. Michael tries the classic move. He basically says he can't imagine any other reason someone would sacrifice themselves except a God-given morality. Matt instantly names it. Matt calls it an argument from personal incredulity. The second Michael says he can't think of another reason, because I can't imagine an alternative is not evidence. It's a confession about the limits of your imagination, nothing more. Then it gets better. Matt lays out that altruism can come from social benefit, from wanting recognition, from a whole range of human motives. And Michael actually agrees that some people act that way. The second he agrees, Matt closes the trap. Matt tells him the fact that some people do this, and that Michael just agreed to it, means he was wrong when he said he couldn't think of any reason. That's the whole game right there. Michael conceded his own premise. And the deeper point Matt makes lands even harder. The only thing required for someone to do the right thing is being convinced it's right, whether or not it's objectively true.
So you don't believe that it's objectively wrong, for example, to kill innocent people or rape babies?
Hang
or
on,
terminate
hang on.
Jews?
We just went through a whole bunch of stuff. And when you got to a point where it was exposed that you were wrong about what you said, you went back to, I don't think it's objectively wrong to rape people and kill babies. That's not what we were just discussing. We were discussing altruism and whether or not there's a justification for it.
But it's what we're discussing now, Matt. My question is it objectively wrong to do certain things?
I've already answered this.
Outside of opinions.
I've already answered this, and I'm sorry that you don't understand it. I will try one more time.
Yeah, try it again.
When you declare what a foundation of morality is, once that's done, you can compare the consequences of various actions with respect to that foundation, with respect to that goal. And that comparison can be objective in the same way that while the rules of chess are ultimately arbitrary, they didn't have to be that way, we made up the game, it is objectively against the rules for you to move your pawn forward 4 spaces at the beginning of the game. Now, you can say, is it objectively wrong? Well, no, we could have house rules, but we're talking about these rules. So before you can make any sort of claim about whether or not something is objectively wrong, you have to have a set of rules that you're going to use to compare it to. In your case, you have what you think God wrote on your heart. In my case, go ahead.
Right. What you're talking about is epistemology, and I'm talking about ontology. That is, you're saying,
Yes.
how can we know what the objective rules are? It's a very fair question. It's an important question. It's a question that ethicists and theologians have asked for thousands of years. My question has nothing to do with that. My question is, do moral laws exist objectively?
No.
Ontologically.
I've already answered that 2 or 3 times. Moral laws do not exist as things unto themselves.
Okay.
Anywhere. There's been no demonstration of that. I don't even know what it would mean to say out here somewhere is an objective moral law, because it doesn't have any, so you could even say, here's what God.
I do know what it means. What it means to say that is that I don't believe that innocent people should be killed. I don't believe
that's not what it means.
Should be raped.
No, that's not what any of that means.
I don't believe that Jews should be gassed.
That's not what any of that means. That's not what any of that means. The fact that there isn't, the fact that you're convinced there's an objective moral code doesn't tell you what it is. The objective moral code could be the exact opposite of what you believe. This is the thing that you've done a couple of different times, which is when you were running through your opening, talking about, oh, we all know this, and then you had a bunch of questions, and then these questions have been answered. These are the reasons why you're a believer. Well, the fact that it seems to me that you are very much, I want there to be a moral code. I want there to be an explanation for the origin of the universe. I want there to be this. And atheism doesn't offer that, so I'll go with Catholicism. And that is also fallacious. It doesn't mean that the answer there is correct.
Okay, this section is where Matt teaches a flat-out masterclass and Michael just can't keep up. And I love it because it's the part most people get wrong on both sides. Here's what people don't realize about moral objectivity. You do not need a cosmic rulebook floating in space to have objective moral comparisons. Matt explains it perfectly. He says once you declare what the foundation of morality is, you can compare the consequences of different actions against that foundation, and that comparison can be objective. The foundation is the goal. The reasoning after that is real and measurable. And then comes the analogy that should be taught in every philosophy class. Matt brings up chess. He points out that the rules of chess are ultimately arbitrary. We invented the game. It didn't have to be this way, but it is still objectively against the rules to move your pawn forward 4 spaces. Sit with that for a second. The rules being human-made does not make them subjective in practice. Arbitrary origin, objective consequences. That one example dismantles the entire idea that without God everything is just opinion. But the cleanest hit is a single word. Matt tells Michael that what he's talking about is epistemology, and what Matt is talking about is ontology. And you can feel Michael not tracking the gap. One is how we know something. The other is what actually exists. Michael keeps demanding to know where the objective moral law is located, and Matt keeps explaining he never claimed it exists as some floating object to begin with. And here's the kill shot for this whole stretch. Matt points out that even if you're convinced an objective moral code exists, that conviction tells you nothing about what it actually says. The real code could be the exact opposite of what Michael believes. Being certain there's a rulebook does not hand you the rulebook.
I've often said that I would be more accepting of atheism as a belief if atheists actually believed it also. But atheists.
So are you saying I'm not an atheist? I am not.
Yeah, I'm saying you're not an atheist.
Okay.
Because you don't live your life that way.
Bullshit. Atheism doesn't tell you anything at all about how to live your life. Atheism is, I am not convinced there's a God, or I am convinced there's not a God. Neither of those things carry with it any sort of weight on how I should live my life. And for you to come in hang on, I'm still talking, sir. And for you to come in and suggest that I'm not an atheist is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. But you know what? I've heard it from you and your ilk over and over and over again, because the truth is you cannot imagine a world where you're wrong.
Atheists believe in a number of things that are every bit as well defined as things that religious people believe in. They believe that there is no God. They believe that nothing caused everything for no reason.
That's not true.
They believe there's no ultimate purpose for anything. They believe there's
That's
no
not true.
These are basic atheist viewpoints.
No, they're not. See, that's the thing.
So you do believe there's a purpose?
No, I don't believe there's an externally imposed intrinsic purpose in the life, in the universe. But what I believe
So that's what I said.
No, sir, it's not what you said. And I'm sorry that mere simple logical clarity is difficult for you. But what I believe isn't necessarily what all atheists believe. Right. You tried to create a bucket and exclude me from it. And the only criteria for that bucket in your no true atheist fallacy is whether or not one believes there's a God. I happen to not believe that there's an intrinsic purpose bestowed upon life from external, but not every atheist agrees with that. Not every atheist agrees with a great many things. So when you start making a list of what atheists believe, as soon as you get past they don't believe in a God, you're wrong.
And now we hit the part that genuinely made me sit up, because Michael does the single most arrogant thing you can do in a debate. He looks at a man who's been an atheist for decades and tells him he's not really an atheist. Michael says it straight out. He's saying Matt is not an atheist because Matt doesn't live his life that way. Let that sink in. He is telling another grown adult what he secretly believes. You have to understand why this is so weak. Matt explains exactly what atheism actually is. He says atheism is simply this: I'm not convinced there's a God, or I'm convinced there's not a God. And neither of those carries any weight on how you should live your life. That's the entire thing. Atheism is an answer to one question. It is not a worldview, not a moral system, not a purpose generator. Michael keeps trying to stuff a whole belief package into a word that only means one thing. And here's something worth knowing, because this exact move has a name that goes back decades in philosophy. It's called the no true Scotsman fallacy, and Matt literally calls it the no true atheist fallacy in the moment. It's when someone quietly redefines a group on the fly just to kick out the inconvenient example standing in front of them. Matt nails it. He tells Michael he tried to build a bucket and exclude him from it. That is not an argument. That is gatekeeping wearing a logic costume. Then Matt brings it all the way home, and this is the line that belongs on the thumbnail. He tells Michael that the moment you start listing what atheists believe, as soon as you get past they don't believe in a God, you're wrong. Every single time. Because there is no atheist scripture, no atheist commandments, no purpose handed down from above that every atheist signs on to. And that is what makes this whole exchange so satisfying to me. Michael walked in with a script about what his opponent supposedly believes deep down, and Matt simply refused to be told who he is. He didn't get louder, he got clearer. And in a debate like this, clarity is the most devastating weapon on the table. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.